The beaver went out the side of the airplane at 200 meters, tumbling, sealed inside a wooden crate, falling toward a wilderness it had never seen. Above it, a parachute cracked open and caught the air. Below it, nothing but Idaho mountain. His name, the men who threw him had decided, was Geronimo, and he had already been hurled out of this same plane over and over on test runs, dropped again and again onto a flying field so the humans could work out whether an animal could survive being airdropped into the backcountry at all. Each time he had crawled, dazed, out of the shattering box, and each time a man had picked him up and put him back in for another go. This time was different. This time, there was no field and no one to collect him. The box hit a mountain meadow, the sides fell open, and Geronimo walked out into the wild alive, the unlikely pioneer of one of the strangest wildlife operations in American history. It was August of 1948, and the state of Idaho had just successfully parachuted a beaver into the mountains because it had run out of better ideas for what to do with an animal that refuses, always, to do what humans want. Hold that image, because it is the whole story in miniature. For 400 years, human beings have trapped this animal, skinned it, drained its wetlands, declared it a pest, hunted it to the edge of extinction across 2 continents, and then, having finally understood what it does, spent fortunes and decades trying to convince it to come back and do that thing on purpose. And every so often, the animal simply ignores all of it, the permits, and the plans, and the parachutes, and does the job itself overnight, for free, better than the engineers, in exactly the spot the engineers had chosen. That is not a fable. That is a news story from January of 2025, from a former military base southwest of Prague. And it is the reason a government official found himself on the phone with reporters explaining how a family of 8 rodents had just saved his country the equivalent of $1.2 million while he was still filling out the paperwork. But to understand why grown officials in the Czech Republic reacted to a beaver dam with something close to awe, you have to understand what this animal actually is, and why almost every human government that has ever dealt with it has ended up humbled. The beaver is a rodent, the second largest in the world after the capybara, an animal that can weigh over 30 kilos and is built in every detail for the work it does. It has teeth that never stop growing, edged with iron-rich enamel that leaves them orange, self-sharpening chisels that let it fell a full-grown tree. It has a flat, scaled tail that works as a rudder and an alarm, transparent third eyelids that let it see underwater, and lips that seal behind its teeth so it can gnaw while submerged. Everything about it is equipment. And it is something almost no other animal on Earth is. A creature that deliberately rebuilds its entire environment to suit itself. Give a beaver a running stream and it will not simply live beside it, it will dam it, using nothing but branches, stones, and mud packed by hand, until the flow slows and spreads and a pond forms behind the barrier. It does this because still, deep water is safety. It protects the beaver from predators and gives it underwater access to food through the winter. But the pond the beaver builds for its own selfish reasons does something enormous to everything around it. It creates a wetland, and a wetland is one of the most valuable and most endangered habitats on the planet. Water that would have rushed downstream and away is instead held on the land, soaking into the ground, raising the water table, filtering out sediment and pollutants, and creating one of the richest habitats in the natural world, a place where fish, amphibians, insects, birds, and plants explode in diversity. Beavers do not just live in the landscape, they manufacture landscape. Ecologists call them a keystone species, a term reserved for the small number of animals whose presence holds an entire ecosystem together, so that when they vanish, the whole web around them frays. A single beaver family, working only for itself, can turn a thin trickle of a stream into a braided complex of ponds and channels and marsh that supports hundreds of other species. And in doing so, it hands a colossal set of benefits to every other creature around it, including, as it turns out, ours, which makes what humans did to them all the more staggering. For centuries, the beaver was worth more dead than anyone imagined it could be worth alive. Its fur is dense, warm, and waterproof, and it became one of the most valuable commodities in the world, the engine of an entire continental fur trade. Beaver fur felted better than almost anything else known, and for 2 centuries it made the hats of Europe, driving a trade so lucrative that the pursuit of it opened up and mapped much of the North American interior. Whole empires and trading companies were built on the back of this one rodent, and so the beaver was trapped relentlessly across Europe and then across North America for its skin and its scent until the numbers collapsed. In North America, a population once estimated in the hundreds of millions was reduced to perhaps 100,000 animals by the start of the 20th century, a collapse of more than 99%. In Europe, the fall was even steeper. Its glands produced castoreum, a substance used for centuries in medicine and later in perfume, so valuable that the beaver was hunted for its scent as well as its skin. In Eurasia, the Eurasian beaver was hunted and trapped to the very point of extinction. By the early 20th century, a species that had once shaped the wetlands of an entire hemisphere had been reduced to a scattering of tiny remnant populations, clinging on in just a handful of isolated pockets across the whole of Europe and Asia, a few relict groups that were all that stood between the species and total oblivion. Every Eurasian beaver alive today descends from those few survivors. In Britain, the beaver was gone completely, hunted to extinction more than 400 years ago, erased so thoroughly that the English forgot they had ever had them. The animal that builds wetlands had been very nearly deleted from the world, and the wetlands it built vanished with it. Across Europe and North America, valley bottoms that had been sprawling, sponge-like mosaics of beaver ponds dried into single narrow channels cut deep into the earth. The water that beaver dams had once held on the land now rushed straight off it, so floods downstream grew sharper and droughts upstream grew harsher. Rivers ran dirtier without the ponds to filter them, and countless species that had depended on beaver wetlands declined alongside their vanished engineer. For centuries, almost no one connected the drowning of one keystone rodent to the slow drying out of whole landscapes. But the two were the same event, unfolding at the speed of a fur trade. And then, slowly, over the 20th century, humans began to realize they had made a terrible mistake. The floods and the droughts and the dead rivers were, in part, the bill for the wetlands they had drained when they killed the beaver. And the cheapest way to get those wetlands back was to bring the animal itself home. The effort to undo 4 centuries of destruction produced some of the most bizarre and revealing episodes in the entire history of conservation. And the very first of them involved an airplane. If a story about the animal that keeps out-engineering every government that tries to manage it is worth your time, take a moment to subscribe, because what happened when officials tried to put beavers back is even stranger than what happened when they tried to wipe them out. The Idaho parachute drop of 1948 was one of the first signs of the turn. By the 1940s, Idaho had the opposite of the old problem. It had too many beavers in the lowlands, where they flooded the property of people who had moved out to the country, and almost none in the remote high mountains, where their dams and ponds were desperately needed to stabilize streams and water supplies. Killing the nuisance animals was the traditional answer. But a conservation officer named Elmo Hetter had a different idea. Move them to where they would do good. The problem was that the mountain wilderness was almost impossible to reach overland, and hauling beavers in by horse and mule was brutal on the animals and the handlers alike. So Hetter looked at the war surplus parachutes left over from the Second World War and did the math. He built boxes that would spring open on landing, tested them with weights, then with the endlessly patient Geronimo. And in the autumn of 1948, his team airdropped 76 beavers into the Idaho backcountry. 75 of them survived. The single death came when one animal worked its way partly out of its box in midair and fell. It was funded, fittingly, by a tax that American hunters themselves paid on guns and ammunition. And it worked so well that the dropped beavers established themselves, bred, and built, their descendants engineering that wilderness to this day. And then the film of the operation was lost for over half a century, sitting misfiled in a government archive until a persistent historian finally rediscovered it in 2014, proof that the whole improbable thing had actually happened. Idaho had learned the lesson early. Sometimes the cheapest, best solution is to get the beaver to the right spot and step out of the way. Europe was learning the same lesson, slowly and across many decades. Beginning in the 20th century, country after country started deliberately reintroducing the Eurasian beaver to rivers it had been missing from for generations, protecting the survivors, moving animals into empty habitat, and watching the wetlands come back with them. The recovery was so successful that in 2008, the International Union for Conservation of Nature formally reassessed the Eurasian beaver and declared it a species of least concern, pulling it back from the brink it had been teetering on a century earlier. And as the beavers returned, scientists began measuring what their dams actually did, and the numbers were striking. Beaver wetlands slow and store water, which blunts the peak of a flood downstream and holds moisture through a drought. They filter agricultural pollutants and trap sediment, cleaning the water that passes through. They can even act as fire breaks, the wet green corridors around beaver ponds resisting wildfire while the dry land around them burns. Studies in England and Wales found that returning beavers boosted the activity of bats and birds and multiplied the abundance of other species around their ponds. The animal was not just surviving again, it was measurably repairing the landscapes humans had spent centuries breaking. But nowhere was the return more fraught or more revealing than in Britain, where the beaver had been absent the longest. The British reintroduction became a slow, cautious, deeply bureaucratic affair, hedged with trials and licenses and studies, because a country that had not seen a wild beaver in 4 centuries was nervous about what it would do. In Scotland, at Knapdale in Argyll, a formal 5-year trial reintroduction was launched, the first legally sanctioned return of a wild mammal to Britain, every animal monitored and studied. And while the officials ran their careful trial, the beaver did what the beaver does. Down in Devon, on the River Otter, a population of wild beavers simply appeared, around 20 of them, living and breeding from an unlicensed or accidental release that nobody had authorized and nobody could quite explain. The government's instinct was to remove them. The public's response was to fight to keep them, and the beavers, monitored and studied in place, were eventually allowed to stay. Time and again, the pattern repeated. Humans deliberating in committees while the animal quietly got on with the work, and the work turning out to be exactly what was needed. By 2017, the British government was announcing formal plans to reintroduce beavers to enclosures like the Forest of Dean, promising it could be the first of many such schemes, treating as a bold, carefully managed policy initiative something the animals were already doing on their own, wherever they got the chance. The Devon population was studied for 5 years and found to reduce flooding, improve water quality, and increase wildlife, then formally allowed to remain, an official verdict confirming what the beavers had demonstrated without asking. The paperwork, once again, had spent years arriving at a conclusion the animals had reached in a season. Which brings the story back to a drainage ditch in the Birdie Hills, southwest of Prague, and to the most perfect demonstration yet of the entire 400-year pattern. The land there had a wound in it, and the wound was human-made. Back in 1925, the Czech government had handed the Bardy region to the military as a training ground, and at some point, the soldiers had carved a bypass gully to drain the area around the Klabava River, pulling the water off the land and degrading the wetland that had been there. For decades it stayed that way, drained and diminished. Then, in 2016, the former military zone was designated a protected landscape area, and conservationists drew up a plan to heal the old wound, to build a dam that would block the artificial drainage, restore the wetland, and shield the Klabava and its population of critically endangered crayfish from acidic, sediment-laden water spilling out of 2 nearby ponds. It was a good plan. It was drafted in 2018. It secured funding, more than $1 million worth. It even secured a building permit. And then it stopped because the land had been used by the military and the ownership questions were tangled, and the negotiations dragged on, and the excavators sat idle, and the permits and the paperwork ground forward at the pace of paperwork. For 7 years, the plan to restore that wetland sat almost exactly where it had started, buried in the machinery of bureaucracy. The Beavers did not apply for a permit. Sometime in the winter, a family of 8 of them moved onto the stalled site, looked at the same artificial gully the engineers had identified as the problem, and started building using stones, wood, and mud in almost precisely the locations the human plan had specified. One January morning in 2025, officials arrived to find the job effectively done. The animals had built a series of at least 4 dams across the drainage channel, exactly where the barrier was needed. And behind those dams, the water had already begun to pool and spread and soak back into the land, forming the pond and the wetland the project had been designed to create. Bohumil Fischer, who heads the birdie protected landscape area, told reporters that the Beavers had done exactly what the plan had called for, and had done it for free, without any project documentation. Nature, he said, had taken its course and created the necessary conditions practically overnight. The estimated saving to the Czech state was 30 million korunas, around $1.2 million. The entire cost of the dam the government had been unable to build, and the Beavers, characteristically, had over-delivered. The wetland they created was roughly twice the size of the one the official project had planned, a sprawl of pools and canals rather than a single engineered barrier, and it began drawing life almost immediately. Jaroslav Obermeier, a senior figure in the Czech Nature Protection Agency, summed up 400 years of human experience with this animal in 3 words to a radio reporter: "Beavers always know best." The saving, it turns out, was only the surface of it, because the thing the Beavers built is worth far more than the money it did not cost. And this is the part that reframes the whole story. A dam built by a construction crew is a finished object the day it is poured. From that moment, it only ages and degrades and eventually needs expensive repair. A dam built by Beavers is the opposite. It is alive because the Beavers are still there, and they maintain it, extend it, and rebuild it every single night for as long as they occupy the site, patching leaks and raising the height and widening the wetland behind it, at no cost, forever, adapting it to the water in a way no concrete structure ever could. The official who watched them work said he expected no conflict with the Beavers for at least the next 10 years, which is another way of saying the government's role in restoring that wetland is now simply to leave and let an animal it once parachuted, once trapped to near extinction, and once tried to legislate back into existence, keep doing for nothing, the job it was always going to do anyway. And if you want more true stories like this one, where the thing we spent centuries trying to control turns out to have been the solution all along, subscribe, and the next one will be waiting for you.